Hey guys, it's your course director Emily Ray here. Just wanted to give you some positive, productive feedback on these visual resumes that you submitted. Now, in Portfolio 6, you're getting pretty close to your MCBS graduation and really getting close to a time where you're going to need to use this resume to perhaps get a job in the media communications industry. So the feedback given here is to kind of help you continue to evolve, what you're working on, to identify some gaps and some opportunities for moving this forward. In Portfolio 7, you will be focusing heavily on both your resume, job search techniques, and how to prepare yourself in terms of interviewing for different positions. Now, the work that we've been doing up to that point is to give you material to work with. You've had career development, career module content that runs concurrently with many of your portfolio classes. And the idea is that when you get to Portfolio 7, you have quite a bit to work with. So just a few things, as a heads up when we go through this review. So I'll be looking for whether or not you guys are establishing a clear connection between the skills and experiences that you've listed on your resume and kind of your objectives or aims in the industry, right? So for example, if your objective is to get a job as a graphic designer, your resume should showcase skills and experience in that area. If you want to get into PR or into strategy, your resume needs to show skills and experience in that area. And so what do you do if you don't have that? And what do you do before you graduate? So certainly there are a number of things, and that could be that you are conceptualizing and executing your own projects, whether that's volunteering. You could do something in a freelance capacity, something pro bono for a friend. You might also look to get an internship, before you graduate, something whereby you can, demonstrate the thoughtful application or the proficient application of the skills and experiences that you've gotten as a student and how that reflects out there in the real world. In addition, when you guys are talking about your experience or what you did in a particular role or a job, I want you to be thinking about what was your unique contribution there, your signature impact. What did you do in that role that nobody else, could or would have done? So, many times when we have jobs, there's a task list, and that would be something that everybody would accomplish in that role. But beyond what you were asked to do, what were you able to achieve? That will help set you apart and kind of highlight, significant value that you could bring to another company or organization. It should be common sense, but it's always a good reminder that spell check needs to happen. A lot of times when we're designing, particularly in creative software, we're not as vigilant about applying the spell check features, and they are in there in Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, whatever you're using to design. You can definitely leverage those tools, but beyond sort of the computer version of spell check, I encourage you guys to have a human eye, a trusted editor, someone who's looking for words that are misused or duplicated, many times, more times than I can count. I've had students talk about, they want to talk about customer service, but they've misspelled customer as costumer. And that's not something that spell check is going to catch. That's just a misused word at that point. And it also goes without saying, but it's always a good reminder when you're feeling fatigued with how often you're having to revisit this resume and update it, is that it's really never going to be finished. You're always going to be gaining more skills and experience, and you should be adding to this resume. Anytime you're submitting one for a job, you will likely have to customize it to align with the posted job description. So you want to make sure that whatever it is that you're working on is easily editable, right? Like that you can update the text to, show what a strong candidate you are for any given position. And then last but not least, you guys are super close to graduation. So by now you should be definitely getting in touch with Wendy Walzer, who is our MCBS career development liaison. She is an excellent source of information and knowledge, especially when it comes to resumes. If you're having trouble figuring out how to say something, how to talk about your skills and experience, the articulation of that in a in a professional way, please give her an email because she can help you guys get to where you need to be. So what I'm going to do is go through these submissions one by one and note a few things for you guys to be thinking and moving forward as you head into portfolio 7. All right, so first up, we're going to take a look at Asia. Now, this is a 2-page resume, and you've got sort of 2 focuses, so like branding strategist and community event and organizer. My first off recommendation is that you need 2 separate resumes, one that just shows your branding work and one that just shows your community event organizing, because together it's got like 2 personalities, and you're really trying to cram a lot of information that, like, if someone's looking for a branding strategist, I mean, it's cool to know you could maybe less community and event organizing as a skill, but that skill, that experience, it might not be as relevant when someone's looking for the branding. So my first recommendation is 2 separate. It's really jam-packed of information, so that's like a good and a bad thing, right? So you've got a lot of things that you can talk about, but at the same time, it's sort of a bit overwhelming. Anytime you have a paragraph of text, it needs to be left aligned, right? So here, creating a strong border, it's a readability issue. When our eyes are wrapping to the next line, it's much easier if there's a consistent starting point. And that, that's general feedback for everybody. Anytime you have paragraph text, it needs to be left aligned. Kind of scrolling down, looking at what we have here, I just see some, some inconsistency. This is all caps, this is small caps, right? And the kerning, meaning the extent to which the letters are pushed apart, it really just, it doesn't add to the stylistic aesthetic going on here. It kind of looks, it makes the words a little bit harder to read. The letters are so far apart. So I like this in the all caps, and I might make it, a little bit bolder. Scrolling down, so again, like, you've got this 2-page resume. I'm thinking that it needs to be 2 different resumes, because it's also kind of weird that you have this exact same information and this exact same information on page 2. It's kind of like a waste of space because you've already set all of that up here. Scrolling down again, like, really great, experience that you can draw on. There's great keyword-rich content here. Stylistically, in terms of the way that this looks, I would encourage, see, there's like no space between the word profile and this black. More inset padding, meaning more breathing room inside these content areas or these containers. I'm going to call this the white container. This is the gray container, green container. The spacing, meaning the distance from here to here, here to here, and here to here. And here to here should all be the same, right? So there's kind of like an invisible line, that demarks that, like, you should have at least this much padding. And that's something that you can apply, moving forward. It's blanket feedback for everybody. Highly encouraged, Asia, about where you are at this point, and, really encourage you to get specific with these resumes. Next up, we're going to look at Michael. So the first thing that jumps out to me is I am appreciating the logo and the brand. It seems like there's quite a few font choices, different looks for the typography. So this is a bit more modern, and then we just have kind of a plain readable sans serif, and then we've got something here that looks almost a little bit Western, and it's not consistently applied throughout. That feedback that I gave Asia on the inset padding, meaning, like, and I'm going to draw this out with my screen capture tools here, is that, like, your content should stay within this area, and everywhere that you see that is beyond sort of this shaded box, is consider that the margins, and don't let your content fall in there, because you certainly have enough room, to bring this all a little bit more, inward. We've got some capitalization inconsistencies here, and just some differences in sizing, right? So this is your visual resume, meaning that it should have a strong aesthetic and consistent, like, with your personal brand. One of the things that I don't see listed here is a portfolio website. So if the work that you are doing has a visual output, you definitely want to showcase that in terms of a portfolio website. It's very powerful to be able able to have that sort of proof, if you will, of your skills and experiences. So again, Michael, being a bit more cohesive with the design aesthetic, looking at the ways that you are inconsistently applying spacing, padding, that you have no real like headings, subheadings, like work history and education, skills, and honors and volunteer should all be the exact same font, the exact same size, exact same color, because those are your headings. Full Sail University here, could be considered subheadings, so they need to have a consistent look and feel. Additionally, it's a bit odd that your contact information is sort of here left aligned in this space where we have this center aligned. I might go ahead and move your logo over here and then just have your contact information listed in that area. You've got some great experience listed. I would bet that you could tease out what you're doing at Full Sail a bit more to provide more information about your unique approach or your unique contribution in those roles. So next up, we're actually going to take a quick look at 3 submissions from Stefania. So she has a lot of different interests, as many of you do, but has already gone ahead and come up with several different versions of her resume, because just like we talked about with Asia, that it will be necessary for you to customize that for the types of jobs. So she has 2 versions of her media communications and 1 fitness. And I'm going to give some blanket feedback here. And so there's a lot of text on this. You have great experience, so that's going to be important, and that's great content. This is a pretty long summary, and while that information is interesting and important, it might be something that's best showcased on a portfolio website where you can go maybe into a bit more detail and not just provide it as text, but maybe you could do something a bit more visual or interactive with that. Including your photo on your resume, this is a visual version of that, so I appreciate the inclusion. Some things to think about too, though, is you're going to need a version of your resume that does not include your photo for different reasons, and that's something that you'll get into in Portfolio 7. Scrolling down with, so I would say this is your contact information. I wouldn't say it's your personal info. Skills and experiences, or skills, software, languages. I'm not a fan of this type of visual interpretation of your skill level because it really doesn't tell me anything, right? There's no spectrum. There's nothing to define this end of the spectrum and this end over here. So does this mean beginner and this means expert? Does this mean proficient? Does this mean a little bit more than proficient? There's no objective understanding of that skill level. And it also just tells me that you are excellent, perhaps, if this means excellent and this means poor, at all of these things. So I can't really even compare. Scrolling down here, all this tells me is that of Microsoft, Google, and Apple, that you know Adobe the least, right? But I don't know if this is like, I don't know the extent to, which this software. So I appreciate sort of the visualization of that, but without any sort of designation that this means poor and this means excellent, it doesn't really mean much to me. I'm going to jump here over to your other media communications. And again, how I feel about this is that there is a lot of stuff, a lot of text. Again, this information would be for a portfolio website. Scrolling down, I would encourage you to add a bit more breathing room. It's a lot of text and it feels overwhelming to read. So think about kind of what you learned in way back in editing for the web about how to lay information out with headings, subheadings, and bulleted lists that make our eyes very easily flow through the material in an F-shaped pattern. There are some, the use of icons here are nice, but because they very easily draw our eye and kind of let let us know that you have skills in these areas. But visually speaking, it's very overwhelming with the amount of information. So the encouragement here would be to get a little bit more streamlined with your message and how you talk about what you've done to support what it is that you want to do. And then last but not least, let's take a look at your fitness. Now this one is much more streamlined, and here it feels like the photo is an appropriate inclusion and choice. I don't know what you would be submitting this for, but my feedback is the same. This is This one feels the most airy, like the more easily scanned to take a look at what you've been doing. But again, this type of visualization of your skills only tells me that you're not very good at belly dancing compared to the rest of what you're doing, right? So I don't know if that's what you're trying to convey, but that's the only objective conclusion that one could come to when looking at that. So I hope that you're able to, with this little bit of feedback on each of these, move these all forward in a better, stronger place. Again, streamlining the text to support what it is that you want to do. Really like being discerning about what to include about your experience in the past to support future goals. Spacing, breathing room, headings, subheadings, bulleted lists, and coming up with a way to better describe this spectrum of skills. I'm going to take a look next at Torad. So this is a very nice, clean version of your resume. We talked in depth with Stephania about this type of visualization. Yes, it shows that you know these things, but this little graph doesn't actually really tell me anything. Of course, I can go to your portfolio website, which I'm incredibly happy that you have included, to see your that type of work. But I'm not a fan of this because I don't know if this is beginner Photoshop and this is intermediate Photoshop, or if this is beginner Illustrator and like expert. So it kind of leaves that open to interpretation, and that's not really something you want to do with your resume. The other thing is that like you have a lot of available space down here, so to kind of crunch everything up in this area feels like a bit crammed. So I would include a bit more spacing, like between responsibilities and the resulting paragraph, maybe a little bit larger in terms of your font size. We've got inconsistent capitalization there. The degree program is actually, it will be a Bachelor of Science in Media Communications, so you'll want to make sure that's accurate. Another thing too is like up here where you say this is what your address is, it's kind of weird that it floats, the zip code floats to that new line and becomes like a dangler, or it's orphaned down there. Looking at this information, it is clear that this is an address. It is clear that this is a phone number. It is clear that this is email. So I'm not quite sure that you need those designations. So something, that I would encourage you to think if that's a necessity. It's very clean. Appreciate sort of the professional aesthetic of what we see here, and would just encourage you maybe to think a little bit more stylistically about the layout, and maybe even adding some more content in these areas to more fully describe your skills and experience. All right, I think this is Sandra Keeley's, but like I don't know because there's nothing showing up here. So it is an oversight, maybe it's incomplete, but certainly will need to be updated. So the first thing that I see when I look at this is a really bright, pretty yellow color. The boxes are interesting, but they are like a lot of small containers of information. Like I'm not quite sure why this information is not in a box and this is in a closed box, but everything else is. So it just doesn't quite look as purposeful. And again, anytime, you guys are kind of listing information that you want to be able to be easily scanned and easily read, you're not going to center align that text, right? So all of this needs to be left aligned so that I can scan it in in that F-shaped pattern, remembering far back to editing for the web, that is something, that you guys need to try and achieve, like within your design. I appreciate the information that you've shared here. It seems that this is a really good start, but would encourage you to detail your experience a bit more, and to pay a bit more attention to the layout and some of the particulars of allowing easily scanning this document for this information. So next up, I'm going to take a look at Stan's, and I pulled this from Stan's website here. So this is kind of a next step from for you guys in this class, is that paying attention to your personal brand aesthetic and how you are carrying that out in all of your materials. So Stan is a professional, in his own right, and has a resume that's very clean, very well laid out. There are no real design faux pas here. It's very well done, and it's using headings and then subheadings and bulleted lists that allow us to really easily move through this information in such a way that we could jump to different parts to find out what we want to find out about Stan, his work history, and any particular role that he's had. But scrolling up to the top here, one thing that struck me is that, like, I'm looking at this, but it feels a little bit disconnected from what I see here, right? So we've got this logo, which is sort of a different brand. Not much, but different. And then the other part is that sales enabler is a bit bigger than your name. And so I'm not sure if that was like purposeful, because that is really how you identify or where you feel like you're bringing, your best game. But in terms of information hierarchy, you are the subject of this document. You're like the title of your resume, your name. So in that sense, I would think that your name needs to be bigger than sales enabler. Coming back to your website here, noticing sort of a difference in colors too, right? So this blue is much different than sort of this light blue here, and wondering about, kind of the overall consistency that you want to achieve. So your portfolio site should look like your resume. And I know that you have kind of a different professional objective and aim, and perhaps like a portfolio site isn't what you're going for so much as an online profile or a place to talk about your work or collaborations that you've done. But certainly, just typography choices and colors, it would reflect well that they are consistent between mediums. And so looking forward to hearing more about, your goals with this, and ultimately, the types of feedback that would be most helpful for you achieving your aims beyond MCBS. So if you guys have any questions about this feedback, please let me know. Happy to continue to be a resource for you guys moving forward. But again, the expectation is that you take what was given here and, go back to the drawing board and to continue to tweak what you're working on, because Portfolio 7 is going to be here before you know it, and you're going to need something to work with. So if you, do yourself the favor of doing it now, you're going to be in a really good place to start to leverage that tool to find the job, that you're hoping to get in the industry.